And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. It is Christmas night. It is Christmas night, ladies and gentlemen, out there in internet land. Thank you for joining us, those of you who choose to. It is, let's see, it's kind of rainy and gross here in Bellows Falls, Vermont. My beloved, the great Betty Sue, is down in Austin, Texas. We had a lovely conversation today, lovely conversation. I hope to see her soon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope to see her soon, but it's a wonderful thing to have a beloved, even if they are down in Austin, Texas. As a proxy, I have her cat, Studio Cat Corduroy, who lives in the studio. Studio Cat Corduroy basically disapproves of almost everything I do. But we love Studio Cat Corduroy. She has very, very cute paws. She places her paws together as she looks up at me and enumerates everything I did wrong all day. And that alone buys her time, ladies and gentlemen. So today, Corduroy had a special Christmas dinner. I sprinkled stinky dried fish on top of her gruel of ground up deer and fish. And she was appreciative, ladies and gentlemen. She was appreciative. She came up to me. She looked up at me and she went, "Ah." And I take that as a sign of appreciation and gratitude. Oh, it's so nice to have this new Christmas tradition of me getting to read this beloved story from the Hunter Family Archives. Who do we have here? We have Terry Hudson. We have Tony Hewlick. Yes, and Tony Hewlick has her glass of wine ready to go. As do I. We have a new drinking game, ladies and gentlemen, a new drinking game in the Bird's Christmas Carol panoply. Every time the word bird is mentioned, you must take a drink. It is up to you to decide how large a drink to take. But let's see, Tony's ready with her glass of red. Terry does not imbibe, but maybe she's ready with her club soda with maybe a twist of bitters or some sort of citrus. Let's see. Facebook user is late joining. She just watched the Water Boys doing Fisherman's Blues. That does seem appropriate, especially if it was dried Fisherman's Blues. Ellen Cloudy. Hi, Ellen. Hi, my brother, Will Hunter. Will and I both experienced the reading of the Bird's Christmas Carol. Judith Camino says, "Me too." Has her glass of wine ready? Has a cat that disapproves of her? Anyway, welcome, Judith. Welcome, Judith. Betty Sue says, hi. Hi, Betty Sue. Facebook user says she may need more whiskey. Yes, you probably will. Very small sip, Facebook user. That's all you need. Lori LaRue says, hi. Ladies and gentlemen, Lori LaRue had a beloved dog named Speckles. And she posted earlier this Christmas season that she tried at times to dress Speckles up in Christmas garb, and Speckles was having none of it. If you had ever met Speckles, ladies and gentlemen, you would know that that is an understatement. I cannot imagine a dog who would have disliked being dressed up in Christmas accoutrement more than Speckles. Kate Colors says, Merry Christmas. She has water. She's thirsty after a ham sandwich. All right. And no small sip, says Facebook user. And she has to be up at 5:30 at work, so she'll be sipping her chamomile tea. All right. It's probably going to be about 35 or 40 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. It's from page 28 to page 53. And last night was from page 5 to 27. So you judge. Are you ready? Again, thank you for being here. It is a joy to be able to do this. Betty Sue has her homemade kombucha. Oh, and any of you down in Austin, Texas, tomorrow night, the great James McMurtry is doing a special extended show at the Continental Club. The Continental Club is the coolest bar in all of Austin, the coolest live music venue. And Betty Sue is going to be a very special guest there tomorrow night for an extended period. So if you're down that way, you be sure and stop over there. Now, before I start reading, one thing I got to say is the Ruggleses in this next section of the story. The Ruggleses are an impoverished family who live in the back, in the old coach house of the adjoining estate. And their language is written in a patois. I am not sure how good a job I'll be able to do at that patois, and I'm also not sure exactly how insulting that patois is. So if the accent changes a bunch, or if I start like editing as I'm reading, please bear with me, okay? Now remember, every time the word bird is mentioned, you're there with a sip, okay? Oh, John Wilhelm. John Wilhelm. Hi, John, out there in Omaha, Nebraska. Chapter 5. Now, you all remember what happened so far? So far, little Carol was born on Christmas Day, and she was named after the carols being sung at the church across the way. And she's a lovely, lovely child, born to a very wealthy family. But she is not well, ladies and gentlemen. She is not well. She is bedridden. She is bedridden, and all the family is terribly sad about that. But she maintains a wonderful attitude, and her sole desire this Christmas is to give the Ruggles in the rear a very special, special Christmas. Some other birds are taught to fly. Before the earliest Ruggles could wake and toot his 5-cent tin horn, Mrs. Ruggles was up and stirring about the house, for it was a gala day in the family. A gala day, I should say so. Were not her 9 children, children, because that's in quotes, so it's like it couldn't be children. Were not her 9 children invited to a dinner party at the great house? And weren't they going to sit down free and equal with the mightiest in the land? She had been prepared for this grand occasion ever since the receipt of Carol Bird's invitation, which, by the way, had been speedily enshrined in an old photograph frame and hung under the looking glass in the most prominent place in the kitchen, where it stared the occasional visitor directly in the eye and made him livid with envy. Birds nest. December 17th, 1880 blank. Dear Mrs. Ruggles, I am going to have a dinner party on Christmas Day, and I would like to have all your children come. I want them, everyone, please, from Sarah Maud to baby Larry. Mama says dinner will be at 5:30 and the Christmas tree at 7, so you may expect them home by 9 o'clock. Wishing you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I am yours truly, Carol Bird. I see one Facebook user says, already need a refill. Breakfast was on the table promptly at 7 o'clock, and there was very little of it, too, for it was an excellent day for short rations, though Mrs. Ruggles heaved a sigh as she reflected the boys, with their India rubber stomachs, would be just as hungry the day after the dinner party as if they had never had any at all. As soon as the scanty meal was over, she announced the plan of the campaign. Now, Susan, You and Kitty wash up the dishes. And Peter, can't you spread up the bed so I can get to cutting out Larry's new suit? Maybe I'll read it with a Vermont accent. Why not? Well, Larry's new suit, I ain't satisfied with his clothes, and I thought in the night of a way to make him a dress out of my old red plaid shawl, kind of Scotch style, with the fringe to the bottom. Eily, you go find that comb and you take the snarls out of that fringe. That's a lady. You little young ones clear out from underfoot. Clem, you and Con hop up onto bed with Larry while I wash your underflannins. 'Twon't take long to dry 'em. Yes, I know it's bothersome, but you can't go into society without taking some trouble. And anyhow, I couldn't get round to 'em last night. Now, Sarah Maud, I think 'twould be perfectly handsome if you ripped them brass buttons off your uncle's policeman's coat and you sewed 'em in a row on the front of your green skirt. Susan, you must iron out yours and Kitty's aprons, and come mighty near forgetting Peoria's stockings. I counted that whole lot last night when I was washing of 'em, and there ain't but 19 anyhow when you fix 'em. And no 9 pairs mates nohow, and I ain't going to have my children wear odd stockings to a dinner company, fetched up as I was. Eily, can't you run out and ask Mrs. Cullen to lend me a pair of stockings for Peoria, and tell her, if she will, that Peoria'll give Jim half her candy when she gets home. Won't you, Peoria? Peoria was young and greedy, and thought the remedy so out of proportion to the disease that she set up a deafening howl at the projected bargain, a howl so rebellious and so entirely out of season that her mother started in her direction with flashing eyes and uplifted hand, but she let it fall suddenly, saying, "No, I vow I won't lick ye Christmas Day if you drive me crazy, but you speak up smart now and say whether you'd druther give Jim Cullen half your candy or go bare-legged to that party." The matter being put so plainly, Peoria collected her faculties, dried her tears, and chose the lesser evil. Clem, having hastened the decision by an affectionate wink that meant that he would go halves with her, with his candy. "Whoa, Clem, good man. Now that's a lady," cried her mother. "Now you young ones that ain't doing nothing, play all you want to before noontime, for after you get through eating at 12 o'clock, me and Sarah Maud's going to give you such a washing and combing and dressing as you never had before, never will again, likely. And then I'm going to set you down and give you 2 solid hours training in manners. And 'twon't be no fooling neither." "All we got to do is go eat," grumbled Peter. "Well, now that's enough," responded his mother. "There's more than one way of eating, let me tell you, and you've got a heap to learn about it, Peter Ruggles. Land sakes, I wish you children could have seen the way I was fetched up to eat. I never took a meal of victuals in the kitchen before I married Ruggles, but you can't keep up that style with 9 young ones, and your pa always away off to sea." The big Ruggleses worked so well, and the little Ruggleses kept from underfoot so successfully, that by 1 o'clock, 9 complete toilettes were laid out in solemn grandeur on the beds. I say complete, but I do not know whether they would be called so in the best society. The law of compensation had been well applied. He that had a necktie had no cuffs. She that had sash had no handkerchief, and vice versa. But they all had shoes and a certain amount of clothing, such as it was, the outside layer being, in every case, quite above criticism. Now, Sarah Maud, said Mrs. Ruggles. How do we feel out there in internet land about my applying a Vermont accent to the Ruggleses? I'm feeling pretty good about it, but let's see. Yeah, Facebook user does say Pa obviously wasn't always off to see if there were 9 kids, but all right. I guess the Vermont accent is all right. Now, Sarah Maud, said Mrs. Ruggles, her face shining with excitement. Everything's read up and we can begin. I got a boiler and a kettle and a pot of hot water. Peter, you go into that back bedroom and I'll take Susan, Kitty, Peoria, and Cornelius. And Sarah Maud, you take Clem and Eily and Larry one to a time. You scrub them and you rinse them, or at any rate, get as far as you can with them, and then I'll finish them off while you do yourself. Sarah Maud could not have scrubbed with any more decision and force if she had been doing floors, and the little Ruggleses bore it bravely, not from natural heroism, but for the joy that was set before them, not being satisfied, however, with the tone of their complexions, and feeling that the number of freckles to the square inch was too many to be tolerated in the highest social circles. She wound up operations by applying a little Bristol brick from the knife board, which served as the proverbial final straw, from under which the little Ruggleses issued rather red and raw and quite out of temper. Yeah. When the clock struck 4, they were all clothed, and most of them in their right minds, ready for those last touches that always take the most time. Kitty's red hair was curled in 34 ringlets. Sarah Maud's was braided in 1 pigtail, and Susan and Eily's in 2 braids apiece, while Peoria's resisted all advances in the shape of hair oils, and it stuck out straight on all sides like that of the Circassian girl of the circus. I'm sure that's a politically incorrect thing to say, but fortunately I don't know what it means. Like the Circassian girl of the circus, so Clem said, and he was sent into the bedroom for it too, from whence he was dragged out forgivingly by Peoria herself 5 minutes later. Then, exciting moment, came linen collars for some, and neckties and bows for others. A magnificent green glass breastpin was sewed into Peter's purple necktie, and Eureka, the Ruggleses were dressed, and Solomon, in all his glory, was not arrayed like one of those. A row of seats was then formed directly through the middle of the kitchen. Of course, there were not quite chairs enough for 10, since the family had rarely wanted to sit down all at once, somebody always being out or in bed or otherwise engaged. But the wood box and the coal hod finished out the line quite nicely, and nobody thought of grumbling. The children took their places according to age. Sarah Maud at the head, Larry on the coal hod, and Mrs. Ruggles seated herself in front, surveying them proudly as she wiped the sweat of honest toil from her brow. Well now, she exclaimed, if I do say so as I shouldn't, I never seen a cleaner, more stylish mess of children in my life. I do wish Ruggles could look at you for a minute. Larry Ruggles, how many times have I got to tell you not to keep pulling at your sash? Haven't I told you if it comes untied, your waist and skirt will part company in the middle, and then where'll you be? Now look me in the eye, all of you. I've often told you what kind of family the McGrills were. I got reason to be proud, goodness knows. Your uncle, he is on the police force in New York City. You can take up the paper most any day and see his name printed right out James McGrill, and I can't have my children fetched up common now like some folks. When they go out, they gotta have clothes and learn to act decent. Now, I want to see how you're going to behave when you get there tonight. 'Tain't so awful easy as you think. Let's start at the beginning and act out the whole business now. Pile into the bedroom there, every last one of you, and show me how you're going to get into the parlor. This'll be the parlor, and I'll be Mrs. Bird. The youngsters hustled into the next room in high glee, and Mrs. Ruggles drew herself up in the chair with an infinitely haughty and purse-proud expression that much better suited a descendant of the McGrills than modest Mrs. Bird. Those of you who are joining us late, one of our participants has insisted that anytime the word bird is mentioned, we must take a drink. Small sips, ladies and gentlemen, small sips. Many pages to go. The bedroom was small, and there presently ensued such a clatter that you would have thought a herd of wild cattle had broken loose. The door opened, and they straggled in, all the younger ones giggling, with Sarah Maud at the head, looking as if she had been caught in the act of stealing sheep, while Larry, being last in line, seemed to think the door a sort of gate of heaven which would be shut in his face if he did not get there in time. Accordingly, he struggled ahead of his elders and disgraced himself by tumbling in head foremost. Mrs. Ruggles looked severe. There, I knew you'd do it in some such fool way. Now go in there and you try that all over again, every last one of you. And if Larry can't come in on 2 legs, he can stay to home. You hear? The matter began to assume a graver aspect. The little Ruggleses stopped giggling, and they backed into the bedroom, issuing presently with lockstep Indian file, a scared and hunted expression on every countenance. No, 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 cried Mrs. Ruggles in despair. That's worse yet. You look for all the world like a gang of prisoners. There ain't no style to that. Spread out more, can't you? And act kind of careless like. Nobody's going to kill you. That ain't what a dinner party is. The third time brought deserved success, and the pupils took their seats in the row. Now you know, said Mrs. Ruggles impressively, there ain't enough decent hats to go round. And if there was, I don't know, so I'd let you wear them. For the boys would never think to take them off when they got inside, for they never do. But anyhow, there ain't enough good ones. Now, you look me in the eye. You're only going just round the corner. You needn't wear no hats, none of you. And when you get into the parlor and they ask you to lay off your hats, Sarah Maud, now you must speak up, and you say, it was such a pleasant evening and such a short walk that you thought you'd leave your hats to home. Now, can you remember? Now, ladies and gentlemen, in the Hunter family, that became a phrase that we all enjoyed saying. It was such a short evening and such a pleasant evening and such a short walk that we thought we'd leave our hats to home. All right, got it? All the little Ruggleses shouted, yes, ma'am, in chorus. What have you got to do with it? Demanded their mother. Did I tell you to say it? Weren't I talking to Sarah Maud? The little Ruggleses hung their diminished heads. Yes, ma'am, they piped more discreetly. Now we won't leave nothing to chance. Get up, all of you, and try it. Speak up, Sarah Maud. Sarah Maud's tongue clove to the roof of her mouth. Now you do that quick now. Ma thought it was such a pleasant hat that we'd better leave our short walk to home, recited Sarah Maud in an agony of mental effort. That was too much for the boys. An earthquake of suppressed giggles swept all along the line. Oh, whatever shall I do with you? Moaned the unhappy mother. I suppose I gotta learn it to you, which she did, word for word, until Sarah Maud thought she could stand on her head and say it backwards. Now, Cornelius, what you going to say to make yourself good company? Do? Me? Dunno, said Cornelius, turning pale with unexpected responsibility. Well, you ain't gonna sit there like a bump on a log without saying a word to pay for your victuals, are you? Ask Miss Bird. How she's feeling this evening, or if Mr. Bird's having a busy season, or how that kind of weather agrees with him, or something like that. Now, we'll make believe I've got to the dinner. We'll make believe we've got to the dinner. Now, that won't be so hard for you, because you'll have something to do. It's awful bothersome to stand round and act stylish. If they have napkins, Sarah Maud down to Peory may put them in their laps, and the rest of you can tuck them in your necks. Now, don't eat with your fingers. Don't grab no victuals off one another's plates. Don't reach out for nothing, but wait until you're asked. And if you never get asked, don't you get up and grab it. Don't spill nothing on that tablecloth, or like as not, Mrs. Bird will send you away from the table, and I hope she will if you do. Susan, keep your handkerchief in your lap, or Peory can borrow it if she needs it. And I hope she'll know when she do need it, though I don't expect it. Now, we'll try a few things to see how they'll go. Mr. Clement, do you eat cranberry sauce? Bet your life, cried Clem, who in the excitement of the moment had not taken in the idea exactly and had mistaken this for an ordinary bosom of the family question. Clement McGill Ruggles, do you mean to tell me that you'd say that at a dinner party? I'll give you one more chance, Mr. Clement. Mr. Clement, will you take some of that cranberry? Yes, marm. Thank you kindly, if you happen to have any handy. Oh, very good indeed. But they won't give you 2 tries tonight. You just remember that. Miss Peory, do you speak for white or dark meat? I ain't particular as to color. Anything that nobody else wants will suit me, answered Peory with her best air. Now that's first rate. Nobody could speak more genteel than that. Miss Kitty, will you have hard or soft sarce with your pudding? Hard or soft? Oh, a little of both, if you please. And I'm much obliged, said Kitty, bowing with decided ease and grace, at which all the other Ruggleses pointed the finger of shame at her, and Peter grunted expressively that their meaning might not be mistaken. Now you just stop your grunting, Peter Ruggles. That weren't greedy. That was all right. I wish I could get it into your heads that it ain't so much what you say as the way you say it. And don't keep staring cross-eyed at your necktie pin, or I'll take it out and sew it on to Clem or Cornelius. Sarah Maud, keep your eye on it, and if it turns broken side out, she'll get to you. Gracious, I shouldn't think you'd ever seen nor worn no jewelry in your life. Eily, you and Larry too. Oh, Eily, you and Larry's too little. Oh, Eily, you and Larry's too little to train, so you just look at the rest and do as they do, and the Lord have mercy on you and help you to act decent. Now, is there anything more you'd like to practice? If you tell me one more thing, I can't set up and eat, said Peter gloomily. I'm so cram full of manners now, I'm ready to burst without no dinner at all. Me too, chimed in Cornelius. Well, I'm sorry for you both, rejoined Mrs. Ruggles sarcastically. If the amount of manners you got on hand now troubles you, you're dreadful easy hurt. Now, Sarah Maud, after dinner, about once in so often, you must get up and say, I guess we better be going. And if they say, oh no, set a while longer, you can set. But if they don't say nothing, you gotta get up and go. Now, have you got that into your head? About once in every so often. Could any words in the language be fraught with more terrible and wearing uncertainty? Well, answered Sarah Maud mournfully, seems as if this whole dinner party's set right square on top of me. Maybe I could manage my own manners, but to manage 9 manners is worse than staying to home. Oh, now don't you fret, said her mother good-naturedly, now that the lesson was over. I guess you'll get along. I wouldn't mind if folks would only say, oh, children be children, but they won't. They'll say, land of goodness, who fetched them children up? It's 5:15, and you can go now. Remember about the hats. Don't all talk to once. Susan, lend your handkerchief to Peory. Peter, don't keep screwing your scarf pin. Cornelius, hold your head up straight. Sarah Maud, don't you take your eyes off of Larry. And Larry, you keep hold of Sarah Maud and do just as she says. Whatever you do, all of you, never forget for 1 second that your mother was a McGrill. That's some lessons, ladies and gentlemen. That's some lessons. All right. On what? We have a cat who's objecting to something. I'm going to keep reading. I don't care what you say. Chapter 6. When the pie was opened. Facebook user says, what's going on with the dying? What's going on with the dying cat? You're going to find out soon enough. You're going to find out soon enough, Facebook user. Chapter 6. When the pie was opened, the birds began to sing. The children, everyone doing okay? I hope so. The children went out of the back door quietly when were presently lost to sight. Sarah Maud slipping and stumbling along absent-mindedly as she recited rapidly under her breath. It was such a pleasant evening and such a short walk that we thought we'd leave our hats to home. It was such a pleasant evening and such a short walk that we thought we'd leave our hats to home. Peter rang the doorbell, and presently a servant admitted them and, whispering something in Sarah's ear, drew her downstairs into the kitchen. The other Ruggleses stood in horror. The other Ruggleses stood in horror-stricken groups as the door closed behind their commanding officer. But there was no time for reflection, for a voice from above was heard saying, "Come right upstairs, please." Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Accordingly, they walked upstairs, and Elfrida, the nurse, ushered them into a room more splendid than anything they had ever seen. But oh, woe! Where was Sarah Maud? And was it fate that Mrs. Bird should say at once, "Did you lay," that Mrs. Bird should say at once, "Did you lay your hats in the hall?" Peter felt himself elected by circumstance the head of the family, and casting one imploring look at tongue-tied Susan standing next to him, said huskily, "It was so very pleasant that we hadn't enough good hats to go around," put in little Susan bravely to help out, and then froze with horror that the ill-fated words had slipped off her tongue. However, Mrs. Bird said pleasantly, "Oh, of course you wouldn't wear hats such a short distance. I forgot when I asked. Now, will you come right in? That was very gracious of her. That was very gracious of her. Now, will you come right into Miss Carol's room? She is so anxious to see you." Just then, Sarah Maud came up the back stairs, so radiant with joy from her secret interview with the cook that Peter could have pinched her with a clear conscience, and Carol gave them a joyful welcome. "But where's baby Larry?" she cried, looking over the group with searching eye. "Didn't he come?" "Larry! Larry! Oh, good gracious, where was Larry?" They were all sure he'd come in with them, for Susan remembered scolding him for tripping over the doormat. Uncle Jack went into convulsions of laughter. "Are you sure there were 9 of you?" he asked merrily. "I think so, sir," said Peoria timidly. "But anyhow, there was Larry," she said, and showed signs of weeping. "Oh, well, cheer up now," cried Uncle Jack. "Probably he's not lost, only mislaid. I'll go and find him before you can say Jack Robinson." "I'll go too, if you please, sir," said Sarah Maud, "for it was my place to mind him, and if he's lost, I can't relish my victuals." The other Ruggleses stood rooted to the floor. Was this a dinner party, forsooth? And if so, why were such things ever spoken of as festive occasions? Sarah Maud went through the hall calling, "Larry, Larry," and without any interval of suspense, a thin voice piped up from below, "Here I be." The truth was that Larry, being deserted by his natural guardian, dropped behind the rest and wriggled into the hat tree to wait for her, having no notion of walking unprotected into the jaws of fashionable entertainment. Finding that she did not come, he tried to crawl from his refuge and call somebody, when, dark and dreadful ending to a tragic day, he found that he was too much intertwined with umbrellas and canes to move a single step. He was afraid to yell. When have I said this? When I have said this of Larry Ruggles, I have pictured a state of helpless terror that ought to wring tears from every eye. And the sound of Sarah Maud's beloved voice some seconds later was like a strain of angel music to his little ears. Uncle Jack dried his tears, carried him upstairs, and soon had him in breathless fits of laughter. Well, Carol so made the other Ruggleses forget themselves that they were presently talking like accomplished diners out. Carol's bed, for you who were wondering about the sick kid, Carol's bed had been moved into the furthest corner of the room, and she was lying on the outside, dressed in a wonderful dressing gown that looked like a fleecy cloud. Her golden hair fell in fluffy curls over her white forehead and her neck. Her cheeks flushed delicately. Her eyes beamed with joy, and the children told their mother afterwards that she looked as beautiful as angels in picture books. There was a great bustle behind a huge screen in another part of the room, and at 5:30, this was taken away, and the Christmas dinner table stood revealed. What a wonderful sight that was to the Ruggles children, who ate their sometimes scanty meals on the kitchen table. It blazed with colored candles. It gleamed with glass and silver. It blushed with flowers. It groaned with good things to eat. So it was not strange that the Ruggleses, forgetting altogether that their mother was a McGrill, shrieked in admiration of the fairy spectacle. But Larry's behavior was the most disgraceful, for he stood not upon the order of his going, but went at once for a high chair that pointed unmistakably to him, climbed up like a squirrel, gave a comprehensive look at the turkey, clapped his hands in ecstasy, rested his fat arms on the table, and cried with joy, join me, William, if you're still watching, and cried in joy, "I beat the whole lot of you." Another Hunter family phrase. Carol laughed until she cried, giving orders meanwhile. Uncle Jack, please sit at the head, Sarah Maud at the foot, and that will leave 4 on each side. Mama is going to help Elfrida, so that the children need not look after each other, but just have a good time. A sprig of holly lay by each plate, and nothing would do, but each little Ruggles must leave his seat and have it pinned on by Carol. And as each course was served, one of them pleaded to take something to her. There was hurrying to and fro, I can assure you, for it is quite a difficult matter to serve a Christmas dinner on the 3rd floor of a great city house. But if it had been necessary to carry every dish up a rope ladder, the servants would gladly have done so. There was turkey, there was chicken, delicious gravy and stuffing. There were half a dozen vegetables, cranberry jelly and celery and pickles. And as for the way these delicacies were served, the Ruggleses never forgot it as long as they lived. Peter nudged Kitty, who sat next to him, and said, "Look, will ya? Every fellow's got his own particular butter. I suppose that's to show you can eat that and no more. No, it ain't either. For that pig of a Peory is just getting another helping." "Yes," whispered Kitty, "and the napkins is marked with big red letters. I wonder if that's so nobody'll nip 'em. And oh, Peter, look at the pictures sticking right onto the dishes. Did you ever? The plums is all took out of my cranberry sauce and it's frizz to a stiff gel," whispered Peoria in wild excitement. "Hi-ya, I got a wishbone," sang Larry, regardless of Sarah Maud's frown. After which she asked to have his seat changed, giving as excuse that he's generally sat beside her and would feel strange, the true reason being that she desired to kick him gently under the table whenever he passed what might be termed the McGrill line. I declare to goodness, murmured Susan on the other side, there's so much to look at, I can't scarcely eat nothing. Bet your life I can, said Peter, who had kept one servant busily employed ever since he sat down, for luckily no one was asked by Uncle Jack whether he would have a second helping, but the dishes instead were quietly passed under their noses, and not a single Ruggles refused anything that was offered him, even unto the seventh time. Then, when Carol and Uncle Jack perceived that more turkey was a physical impossibility, the meats were taken off and the dessert was brought in. A dessert that would have frightened a strong man after such a dinner as preceded it, but not for the Ruggleses, for a strong man is nothing to a small boy. And they kindled to the dessert as if the turkey had been but a dream, and the 6 vegetables but an optical illusion. There was plum pudding, there was mince pie and ice cream, there were nuts and raisins and oranges. Kitty chose ice cream, explaining that she knew it by sight, though I've never tasted none. But all the rest took the entire variety without any regard to consequences. My dear child, whispered Uncle Jack as he took Carol an orange. There is no doubt about the necessity of this feast, but I do advise you, after this, to have them twice a year, or quarterly perhaps, for the way these children eat is positively dangerous. I assure you I tremble for that terrible Peoria. I'm going to run races with her after dinner. Never mind, laughed Carol. Let them have enough for once. It does my heart good to see them, and they shall come oftener next year. The feast being over, the Ruggleses lay back in their chairs languidly. William, are you still listening? Like small, is it small or like little? No. Like little gorged boa constrictors, and the table was cleared in a trice. Then a door was opened into the next room, and there, in a corner, facing Carol's bed, which had been wheeled as close as possible, stood the brilliantly lighted Christmas tree, glittering with gilded walnuts and tiny silver balloons, and wreathed with snowy chains of popcorn. The presents had been bought mostly with Carol's story money, and were selected after long consultations with Mrs. Bird. Each girl had a blue knitted hood, each boy a red crocheted comforter, all made by Mama, Carol, and Elfrida. Because if you buy everything, it does not show so much love, said Carol. Then every girl had a pretty plaid dress of a different color. Every boy had a warm coat of the right size. Here the useful presents stopped, and they were quite enough. But Carol had pleaded to give them something for fun. I know they need the clothes, she had said when they were talking over the matter just after Thanksgiving, but they don't care much for them after all. Now, Papa, won't you please let me go without part of my presents this year only, and give me the money that they would cost to buy something to amuse the Ruggleses? Oh, you can have both, said Mr. Bird. Promptly, Is there any need of my little girl's going without her own Christmas? I should like to know. Spend all the money you like. Oh, the poor father, he is having such an existential crisis. But that isn't the thing, objected Carol, nestling close to her father. 'Twouldn't be mine. What's the use? Haven't I almost everything already? And am I not the happiest girl in the world this year, with Uncle Jack and Donald at home? You know very well it is more blessed to give than to receive. So why won't you let me do it? You never look half as happy when you are getting your presents as when you are giving us ours. Now, Papa, submit, or I shall have to be very firm and very disagreeable with you. Oh, very well, Your Highness, I surrender. Oh, that's a dear Papa. Now, what were you going to give me? Confess. A bronze figure of Santa Claus, and then the little round belly that shakes when he laughs like a bowl full of jelly is a wonderful clock. Oh, you would never give it up if you could see it. Nonsense, laughed Carol. I never have to get up to breakfast, nor go to bed, nor catch trains. I think my old clock will do very well. Now, Mamma, what were you going to give me? Oh, I hadn't decided. A few more books, I suppose, and a gold thimble, and a smelling bottle, and a music box, perhaps. Oh, poor Carol, laughed the child merrily. She can afford to give up these lovely things, for there'll still be left Uncle Jack and Donald and Paul and Hugh and Uncle Rob and Aunt Elsie and a dozen other people to fill her Christmas stocking. So Carol had her way, as she generally did, but it was usually a good way, which was fortunate under the circumstances. And Sarah Maud had a set of Louisa May Alcott books, and Peter a modest silver watch, Cornelius a tool chest, Clement a doghouse for his lame puppy, Larry a magnificent Noah's Ark, and each of the younger girls a beautiful doll. You can well believe that everybody was very merry and very, very thankful. All the family, from Mrs. Bird down to the cook, said that they had never seen so much happiness in the space of 3 hours, but it had to end as all things do. The candles flickered and went out. The tree was left alone with its gilded ornaments, and Mrs. Bird sent the children downstairs at 8:30, thinking that Carol was looking tired. Now, my darling, you have done quite enough for one day, said Mrs. Bird, getting Carol into her little nightgown. I'm afraid you'll feel worse tomorrow, and that would be a sad ending to such a charming evening. Oh, wasn't it a lovely, lovely time, whispered Carol. From first to last, everything was just right. I shall never forget Larry's face when he looked at the turkey, nor Peter's when he saw his watch, nor that sweet, sweet Kitty's smile when she kissed her dolly, nor the tears in poor dull Sarah Maud's eyes when she thanked me for the books, but we must not talk of it any more tonight, said her mother. You are too tired, dear. I am not so very tired, Mamma. I felt well all day. Not a bit of pain anywhere. Perhaps Perhaps this has done me good. Perhaps. I hope so. There was no noise or confusion. It was just a merry time. Now, may I close the door and leave you alone, dear? Papa and I will steal softly by. Papa and I will steal in softly by and by to see if you are all right. But I think you need to be very quiet. Oh, I am willing to stay by myself, but I am not sleepy yet. And I am going to hear the music, you know. Yes, I have opened the window a little and put the screen in front of it so that you will not feel the air. Can I have the shutters open? And won't you turn my bed, please? This morning I awoke ever so early, and one bright, beautiful star shone in that eastern window. I never noticed it before, and I thought of the star in the east that guided the wise men to the place where the baby Jesus lay. Good night, Mama. Such a happy, happy day. Good night, my precious Christmas carol, Mother's blessed Christmas child. Bend your head a minute, Mother dear, whispered Carol, calling her mother back. Mamma dear, I do think that we have kept Christ's birthday, this time, just as he would like it. Don't you? I am sure of it, said Mrs. Bird. Softly. Yeah, Kleenex time, Tony Hewlick. She's correct. All right. Chapter 7. We're at page 49 of 53. This is when my mom would start breaking down, ladies and gentlemen. This is when she'd start breaking down. That woman who could dispatch a chicken with no more of a how do you do than nothing at all, she would break down when this part of the book came. Chapter 7, The Birdling Flies Away. The Ruggleses had finished a last romp in the library with Paul and Hugh, and Uncle Jack had taken them home and stayed a while to chat with Mrs. Ruggles, who opened the door for them, her face aglow with excitement and delight. When Kitty and Clem showed her the oranges and nuts that they had kept for her, she astonished them by saying that at 6 o'clock, Mrs. Bird had sent her the finest dinner she had ever seen in her life. And not only that, but a piece of dress goods that must have cost $1 a yard if it cost a cent. As Uncle Jack went down the rickety steps, he looked back in the window for a last glimpse of the family as the children gathered about their mother, showing their beautiful presents again and again, and then upward to a window in the great house yonder. A little child shall leave them, he thought. Well, if anything ever happens to Carol, I will take the Ruggleses under my wing. Softly, Uncle Jack, whispered the boys as he walked into the library a few minutes later. We are listening to the music in the church. The church has sung Carol, Brothers, Carol, and now we think that the organist is beginning to play My Ain Country for Carol. Oh, I hope she hears it, said Mrs. Bird. But they are very late tonight, and I dare not speak to her lest she should be asleep. It is almost 10 o'clock. The boy soprano, clad in white surplice, stood in the organ loft, the light shone full upon his crown of fair hair, and his pale face, with its serious blue eyes, looked paler than usual. Perhaps it was something in the tender thrill of the voice or in the sweet words, but there were tears in many eyes, both in the church and in the great house next door. I am far from a home. I am weary. This is written in some odd dialect, ladies and gentlemen. Forgive me if I screw this up. Okay. I am far from a home. I am weary aften whiles from a languid for ham bringing and my father's welcome smiles. And I'll ne'er be full content until my ain do see the gowan gates at heaven in my ain country. The earth is decked with flowers, money tinted fresh and gay, and the birdies wobble blithely, for my father made them say. But these sights and these sounds will as nothing to my be when I hear the angels singing in my ain country. Like a bairn to its mother, a wee birdie to its nest, I fain would be ganging now unto my father's breast. For he gathers in his arms helpless, worthless lambs like me, and carries them himself to his ain country. There were tears in many eyes, but not in Carol's. The loving heart had quietly ceased to beat, and the wee birdie in the great house had flown to its home nest. Carol had fallen asleep, but as the song, I think perhaps, I cannot say, but I think she heard it after all. So sad an ending to such a happy day, perhaps to those who were left. And yet Carol's mother, even in the freshness of her grief, was glad that her darling had slipped away on the loveliest day of her life, out of its glad content into everlasting peace. She was glad that she has gone as she had come, on the wings of song, when all the world was brimming over with joy, glad of every grateful smile, of every joyous burst of laughter, of every loving thought and word, indeed the dear last day had brought. Sadness reigned, it is true, in the little house behind the garden. And one day, poor Sarah Maud, with a courage born of despair, threw on her hood and shawl, walked straight to a certain house a mile away, up the marble steps into good Dr. Bartol's office, falling at his feet as she cried, "Oh, sir, it was me and our children that went to Miss Carol's last dinner party. And if we made her worse, we can't never be happy again." Then the kind old gentleman took her rough hand in his and told her to dry her tears, for neither she nor any of her flock had hastened Carol's flight. Indeed, he said that if it had not been for the strong hopes and wishes that filled her tired heart, she could not have stayed long enough to keep that last merry, merry Christmas with her dear ones. And so the old years, fraught with memories, die one after another, and the new years, bright with hope, are born to take their places. But Carol lives on in every chime of Christmas bells that peal glad tidings, and in every Christmas anthem sung by childish voices. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is the birds' Christmas carol. Oh, thank you all for joining us. What does Tony Hewlick says? Great story. Glad to spend some of my Christmas with you and your storytelling. I have a little wine left. Ho, ho, ho. All right, a Merry Christmas to all, and a Merry, Merry New Year, or a Happy, Happy New Year. All right, you all take good care. Bye-bye.